and welcome to our webinar today. Looks like there's a couple new faces here. Morgan and is it Sharada?
Sharada Krishnan.
Sharada, great. Thank you guys for joining today. We may have, a couple more faces joining us here soon, but we're going to be talking about nonprofit funding today. So glad that you joined us. My name is Hannah Curtis. I'm a coordinator with the North Metro Small Business Development Center. If you're not familiar with our services, we offer free one-on-one consulting services for owners of small businesses and nonprofit organizations. And we also offer educational services like this webinar today and some other courses that we have going on. This session is actually also part of our own little North Metro Small Business Development Center Small Business Week. So we really are celebrating all the great work that small businesses and nonprofits are doing in our North Metro area this week. And we have other programming to kind of celebrate that work as well. We had a session yesterday and a session tomorrow coming up on more of an HR perspective on returning to the in-person workplace. So if you're interested in any of our other programming, you can always check out our website. I'll throw it in the chat here in a minute, but it's northmetrosbdc.com, maybe where you heard about this program, but if not, it's a great resource. So again, I'll put that in the chat. We also have a drawing you can enter this week to win some free prizes special to the Small Business Week. So just some fun stuff going on at our office. But for today, like I said, we'll be talking about nonprofit funding and fundraising, and I want to introduce you to Margaret Katz Cann. Her business is MKC Coach. She does consulting and coaching mostly for nonprofit executives. So we're so happy to have her with us today, give us all of her knowledge, and we'll go over the content today. So I'll turn it over to Margaret, and as you have questions, we want this to be very interactive. So as you have questions throughout the session, feel free to put those into the chat. And Margaret, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks for the introduction, and I'm happy to be here. I'm glad you guys are here. I know there's so much, everybody's so sick of being online, and so the gift of having just a couple of people show up is my hope is deeply to have this be a conversation, and I'm available to help and answer questions. Just to add on to what Hannah said, I worked for a couple decades in the nonprofit world. I was vice president ultimately at the Community Foundation in Boulder County. And I started there when it was a little baby startup with not very much money and helped to grow it. I turned out, that was my first fundraising job. I turned out to be kind of a joyful fundraiser, but I work with lots and lots of people who aren't. I think I was an anomaly for sure. And yeah, so I do a lot of coaching with executive directors who would rather have a root canal sometimes than pick up the phone, or can be found hiding under their desks. And rather than having them feel shame and dread, we try to figure out what they are bumping up against. So we could talk about that a little bit today, but actually what I would love to do is ask each of you to introduce yourselves and tell me what nonprofit you are affiliated with, if any, and kind of what your role is. And then let me know something that you would like to learn before we are done today, or something that you would like to have answered. And then I can try to speak to that. Morgan, do you maybe get us started?
Hi guys, I'm the development coordinator at A Precious Child. A Precious Child, if you're not familiar, is located in Broomfield, but we serve the Denver metro area, and we empower children to succeed by providing them with opportunities and resources they need to reach their full potential. And I am looking forward to being inspired to try out some new fundraising strategies that maybe we're not currently employing.
Okay. Sounds good. Great. And I'm going to say this, and I probably, it was with an SH, Sharada?
Sharada.
Yeah.
Sharada. I currently am the director of horticulture at the Denver Botanic Garden, so you can see the nice lotus behind me.
Yes.
But I have been recently offered executive director position of a global nonprofit organization. It's a membership organization, which I'll be doing in addition to my job at the Botanic Garden. So we are working out the details. So I'm not going to tell which organization yet, because It's not confirmed yet. They've offered me, and we are working out how I can do both jobs at the same time. And
Great.
and so one of my goals, if I do take on that position, I'll probably be making a decision in the next couple of days. If I do take on the position, is to, within my first 90 days, to do a development plan for that organization, because they don't have much funding, because they are doing the position, executive director position, as an independent contractor. And I think eventually the role of this new ED will be to raise enough funds so that way we can be an employer also. So my goal would be a big part of my goal will be fundraising. And so my hope is in the first 90 days, develop a development plan for the organization.
Okay. Sounds good. And Adrian, how about
Real
you?
Sure, real quick, Sharada, good work over there at the Botanic Center. My kids love it over there. I love it over there. That's awesome. So cool. But so my name is Adrian. I'm with Energize Colorado, which they do a lot of different things in the nonprofit space, but in particular, I'm on their veterans team. So it's kind of our mission to help out the veteran small business who were impacted by COVID. And there's a whole lot that goes into that, but I'm hoping to get out of this today, not only some strategies I can use to kind of, deploy on that team and be a little bit more articulate and clear about how we're raising funds, but also for my day job, I interact with nonprofits on an investment side. So helping them have ways to, get over those humps that we all have for asking for money, but also, have them incorporate those strategies into their own businesses as well. So I'm here for a lot of things, Margaret. Hopefully you can help.
Great. That sounds good. Well, I had promised sort of five strategies, and I even have a bonus one. So we can get to 6. And, I will say again, I do coaching and I do consulting. And one way to think about that is the consulting. I do work with groups to come up with fundraising plans and, pick which activities they're going to do and help them timeline those and help, set up annual appeals and all of those different kinds of things. But the coaching work is really less about the doing and a little bit more about the being. It's kind of how we are in choice about how we show up. And so most of the things that I'm talking about today are going to really be in the domain of individual fundraising and how we show up with donors, how we talk to donors. And this first one that I want to talk about, really, it came up so hard and so frequently at the beginning of COVID, but I don't feel like it's really actually gone away yet. I mean, I understood it at the beginning, and it was having a lot of executive directors who were reluctant to reach out because they had sort of decided that the work that they were doing was less relevant during the pandemic than the work somebody else was doing. So acutely at the beginning, I talked to people who were in a variety of different kinds of organizations, and they felt like if they weren't a food bank, at the beginning of COVID, that they didn't have the right to be asking for money, or that they weren't deserving. And so strategy number 1 is you don't actually get to decide what your donors are interested in ahead of time. And this is I from the coaching world, one of the coaching skills that I actually sometimes teach, and just did a podcast about this actually, is this idea that our donors are actually naturally creative, resourceful, and whole people, that they get to make up their minds about what they want to do and what to give money to, and that we do ourselves and them a grave disservice by deciding ahead of time, not only that they wouldn't be interested, but also if we were coming to a meeting, deciding ahead of time what they would be interested in, rather than kind of engaging with them and doing a thing, kind of reading space, like when you are talking and you've lost somebody, how do you notice that, and how do you pivot? So after each of these, I'd love to just pause and check in, because we have this little group here. Thoughts? Anything resonate about that? Does that come up for anybody?
Yeah, I have a question about that in terms of, so I think I understand what you're saying. It's we're not trying to, we don't get to make that decision for somebody where they want to deploy their resources, their funds. So knowing that, I mean, how does that come across in a conversation? Because you're still basically hoping that they're going to choose you, like you want them to choose you, I think, but how do you, how do you steer the conversation that way, knowing that you had this other agenda, which is, hey, I'd like you to donate to my organization?
Yeah, I think it has to do with, and this will probably get into a, number 2, 3, 4, something like that. But it's deciding that you are relevant. Whatever organization that you are working for is relevant. And, certainly we have seen some nonprofits go away, but, not as many as was predicted at the beginning of COVID. And I think that's because, I think there were, for example, like museums and programs that couldn't provide one single day of service during the past 12 months and are still struggling in many cases to figure out how to reopen. And they had to decide to tell the story to their donors, like, we get it that we're not doing anything right now, but we're asking you to support us, so we'll still be here after. So it sort of has to do with figuring out, like, what is your story going to be, and how are you going to engage with your donors without deciding ahead that they're not interested, right? Without carrying the narrative, like, why would a donor give to a museum when there's more relevant stuff happening?
Right.
It's remembering that actually the numbers tell us that people don't give less when they do crisis funding. When there's a hurricane and people give, actually that's not instead of their annual giving, that is in addition to, and there is science about that. It doesn't take away from people supporting. And so, if somebody cared before about the environment, or they cared about gay and lesbian causes, like, just because there is a pandemic or a hurricane or whatever, they don't stop caring about those things.
Sure.
Does that answer your question?
Yep. Thank you.
Sure. So that's actually a great pivot into number 2. Anytime that things are uncertain is a terrible time to get shy. Right? Like, this is not your moment to blush and not talk. So this is a great time to get big, to share, to try to stay important. Right. So it's what I just talked about. Even if you're, working at an organization that isn't super active, what's the story that your donors need to know, and how do you make sure that you get in front of them? And I'm sort of curious, actually, and it looks like we have another person who's joined us, so maybe I will pause and welcome. I don't know how to say your name, but I'm going to try. Fatumata, can you hear me? Are you there? Okay, well, hopefully. And how about for some of you who have been at your, Morgan, I'm curious, you've been at A Precious Child. Tell me, what did you guys do that sort of worked to keep telling your story during COVID?
Yeah, we really pivoted to our virtual events. Early on in the pandemic, I think it was decided that we would be virtual, and our events director did a really great job of creating events that were very engaging. So we really focused on a lot of client stories, and our clients that we serve have really struggled during the pandemic. And so I think that we were just very effective in getting that message across. And something that we've been working on is, for a lot of people, life is going on as normal now, or the new normal. And, they're not struggling as much, especially our donor base. And so we're really trying to get the point across and tell our client stories that it is not over for them, and they're still struggling. And, we saw an over 1,600% increase in the need for our services in 2020, and we expect that number to double this year. So really, a combination of stories and also hard facts and numbers like that.
Yeah, it sounds like you've done a lot well. If you could look back and maybe learn from something that didn't go so well, what might that be?
So, on the flip side of that, people are really over virtual events now, I think, for the most part. And we just had our virtual luncheon, and we fell just short of our fundraising goal. But that being said, we do have a golf tournament coming up, and it sold out really quickly. So I think that it's pointing to that people are, they're tired of the virtual events and the virtual this and the virtual that, and they're really anxious to get back in person. And so we are planning on having big events later on in the year in person, where we're really going to, up our goals then to get people re-engaged.
Yeah. And are you thinking about doing that sort of in a venue, or what's?
Yeah, our annual gala we're looking at doing at the Westin Westminster out here in person. So
yeah. And what kind of feedback are you getting from your donors as you talk about that?
That they're ready to be in person, and that they're ready to party with their friends, and so fingers crossed for that.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, Sharada, how about you? I know you're not so much in the fundraising side, but
now we have a development department, but I think, we did one great. Our donors were, they were very generous this past year, and all the people who always give, they probably upped their donations. And I think a lot of people also, we did have admission after June, we opened up again, and we had admission on limited scale pre-booking, and we're still doing pre-booking, but we have opened up, and we did a plant sale. Right now, our plant sale is going on today, and it is a virtual plant sale, and we will have a in-person plant sale Monday and Tuesday. But last year, we really, by April, we had to then change our plant sale strategy, and we still did the plant sale, and we sold out. So people were yearning to come to the gardens, to visit the gardens for peace of mind, and it was like a way to connect with nature and get out.
Yeah.
And we financially, we did very well.
Yeah. And what did it feel like was a message that resonated even when the gardens were closed down?
I think, people think of Denver Botanic Gardens as a gem in the city, that they didn't want us to go down. They wanted to make sure that we thrived.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and Adrian, what did you notice with your fundraising?
So it's more conceptual, actually, which is this idea that people will tell you what they want if you ask them, right? And that, in the way, for the botanical gardens, right? They wanted it's a gem in the city. They want to preserve that. So it's almost like people will reflect right back to you when you ask them in the right manner. Hey, what am I looking for? Or what are you looking for? They'll say, oh, I don't want this gem in my city to go away. Or I want to make sure that these people in my community, have what they need. So I guess it's always a reminder for me to kind of just ask. Just not have that. Just not make assumptions, don't assume, but ask, because they're going to tell you most of the time, right? They're already interested in what you're doing. So if you just ask them, they will tell you,
Yeah. Sounds good. All right. I'm going to move on. Number 3, careful about buying into the collective myth that people aren't making money, that people haven't been making money for the past year. That's certainly true about some people. But I think, even though Adrian, more about this, or maybe you're equally perplexed, but as long as the stock market is doing well, most of our donors are still doing okay. During 2008, 2009, this was a different conversation, because I think people did feel very threatened about whether they had access to money or not. But that has not been, the experience that I have seen with most of my nonprofits that I work with this year. So, and I think, the other thing that we've seen during COVID is that some incredibly lucky companies that just happened to, like Zoom, who happened to already be doing something that was, Peloton bikes, all those kinds of, although I did read that they did a massive recall, so maybe they're less happy today than they were a couple weeks ago. But Nike has done great. People who sell propane heaters for right. Like there's been, there's been a lot of lucky, and there's been a lot of creative too, right? But there's a lot of people who have actually found a niche and nailed it. I will say about the Botanic Gardens, I went to the holiday lights And that
Oh, yeah.
that was amazing, right? I mean, it was exactly what everybody needed, to do. So I'm imagining that did really well.
Yeah.
But it was like there are ways. It's just an invitation, like without shutting it down, without shutting your creativity down. Just know like people are still hungry for things.
I got a sorry, I
Yeah.
got a question about that, or at least
Yes.
this is something I've struggled with. So, in my industry, I do both of these things, right? I have to get people to have that conversation and balance those needs. But what I come up against a little bit is the sensitivity of, hey, I can invite you to give this organization money, and I can show you how to do that in a way that benefits you, right, as well as the organization. And I can't get over in my head sometimes, like I'm trying to steer them towards one path or the other, right? I'll say, this is really good for your tax write-off. You can write this donation off, and it's a good thing, or you can send some stock over or something, and not have incur the capital gains. Like I'm focused on that most of the time. So how do I mean, how would you recommend just to change that conversation? Because I feel like I sort of, I don't know, insert myself in there and say, hey, I'm really trying to save you money versus trying to help you help an organization. Does that make sense?
It does. Well, I mean, first, I guess to believe, again, the science on this, which is, tax breaks are very low on the list of what motivates people.
Right.
People are motivated by their hearts. And then because they're smart, successful people, they would like to maximize. So it's really a secondary conversation. And, I think if you want to have a deeper conversation with your clients, I think a conversation about values and legacy, is probably a great place to start. What do you want? What do you want your kids to know about you? About what you care about. What are 5 words that describe things that you value? And, from there, how does philanthropy fit into that?
Sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. And then after that, by all means, get super tactical.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So got it. Okay. Thank you. Helpful.
What does happen when you initiate those conversations, Adrian, with clients about philanthropy? Like, because I worked with a lot of professional advisors at the Community Foundation, and my experience there was that there was a pretty low threshold. Like if they asked about it once and it didn't get sucked up happily, that it was, they weren't comfortable bringing it up again.
Yeah. Being honest, I rarely initiate that conversation. Typically I'll let the clients guide me on that one. And if it's something that I pick up from what they tell me, then we'll have that conversation. But really, I'm not very good at drawing that part of it out, right?
Yeah.
I honestly don't start it very often.
Yeah. So what do you believe? Can I play here a little bit? Permission to double click on that? Because I do think that's an asking issue, right?
Right.
So what do you believe about them that makes it hard for you to bring that up?
I think that maybe a couple of things, but the first thing that springs to my mind is that I believe they're not here to talk to me about that. They're here to talk to me about how they want to invest specifically, and that's a separate part of their life maybe, and they don't want to bring that into this discussion. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's the first thing that popped into my head, I think.
Yeah. And what has you believe that, do you think? Like
that's how I am. Right? That's how I am. I wouldn't want anybody asking me that.
Really?
Or at least I think I would want to bring that up and say, I guess I would hope that somebody would ask me, hey, what's important to you? And then I would say, these are the things that are important to me. And if it's on that list, it's on that list. But I don't want somebody bringing it up, because then I'm going to feel like it should be on that list. If it's not on that list, and I feel bad about myself because I didn't put, giving on this list of things that are important to me. All this baggage, I guess, is how I would view that. Yeah.
So we're just going to point right back to number 1 for a minute, that you don't actually get to decide ahead of time.
Right. No.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm just sort of pointing to that because I think, that's a great example, right?
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas again, I've worked, across the board with lots and lots of professional advisors. And I think here's homework for you, talk to people who are comfortable bringing it up and ask them like what happens in their relationships.
Yeah.
with their clients when they get to talk about that.
I would also throw out too, I feel like there's a judgment angle, like not on my part, but I don't want to, like if there's, going back to the vets thing, that happens to be a cause I care a lot about. I am a vet, so it's natural for me and I feel comfortable with that. But I think even when I tell people that, there's always a judgment that's happening, or at least I feel like there's a judgment that's happening, right? Like, oh, this guy's a vet, so all of the stigma that goes on to vet people, like I get all of a sudden, or I feel like I would get that because I mentioned it. And I don't know if that's just irrational fear, but it's there.
So this is you saying like when you mention what you're interested in, or when you ask other people to give?
When I ask people what they're interested in, and if we're talking about, hey, is giving something you're interested in, then if they said yes, it is, here are the organizations I really care about, I feel uncomfortable sometimes asking that because they're gonna, I don't want them to feel like I'm going to judge them based on what's important to them. I don't,
Yeah.
No.
And you're projecting because you feel like people judge you for wanting to support veterans.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Huh. That's interesting to me. What's just trying to even think about what the question is. What makes you think that?
Just all the stuff that happens to veteran, groups, right? There's not a lot of happiness sometimes in some of the veteran communities, right? There's PTSD struggles, there's traumatic brain injury struggles, there are people missing limbs all over the place. And it's kind of, as vets, I think we're all sort of sensitive to, throwing our weakness out in front of people. And I think it's all just wrapped up into that, right? Like, oh, if you're into these vet causes, then maybe you have PTSD or maybe you have these issues too. But anyway.
Okay. So you feel like they're making up stuff about you personally?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah. So here's a fundraising, like this is me taking off the coach hat and putting on the consultant hat. What would it feel like to you if you just actually started with that, like naming? I get that this is not always the most glamorous thing on the planet. I understand that, but like, what if you said it sort of not preemptively, but that you kind of owned?
Sure. Yeah. Being a
what
little
would
bit
that
vulnerable.
feel like?
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that diffusing a little bit. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It could still be uncomfortable, but
yeah. Like what would you need to say to make it comfortable?
I don't know. Something like, I think I had to go into my story. I mean, you've mentioned the story a few times, but I think I would bring a story out, and talk about, my involvement with a few vet nonprofits. One of them didn't end well, and others are doing good work. So I think maybe kind of focusing on what I'd want to see happen, or what versus the struggles, I guess, would be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a question for you, but actually I'm gonna just, like, what do you believe motivates people to give?
Is that you asking me?
I am asking you.
Oh, what motivates people to give? From what I have seen, it's usually one of two things. It's a combination of being asked to do something, to say, would you do it? And people love to do favors, I think I've found. So sometimes it's just out of the goodness of their heart, people, who have a relationship with you, if you ask, then they will give. And then some people are diehard into, or not diehard, that's not the right choice of words, but they're very into, like, going back to the botanical gardens, or even Morgan, your organization, right? Like, I live in Westminster, which is a stone's throw from Broomfield. So I think people who live in these communities, like I do, like, we want to see things good happen in our community. So if we see our current efforts as being ineffectual, and somebody presents you with an opportunity, like, hey, you can give money to this organization and it will help, and here's the impact, many people want that. I would definitely want that. I have done that in the past, and that's motivated me. So I think being able to see, some sort of direct impact that's meaningful to you is pretty important.
Yeah, I love that. So that's a great segue to number 4, which is get and stay consistent in your messaging and your storytelling. The first conference I think that I ever went to, our keynote speaker was this guy who was the executive director of the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, which was, had astronomical growth for obvious reasons, as so many companies did well. And he said, when I'm driving around and I see somebody driving a Porsche, that's my like, oh, I blew it. I should have asked this person for money. And he was sort of equating like, when people decide to spend on something, and it doesn't have to be a Porsche, that's obviously a higher end thing, but he was trying to think of like what are the things that they get out of that experience, what is it that lights them up about owning that car, and how can I tell a story that has a parallel impact on people, where I create like, okay, identify there's need, that would be you opening with, there's messy in the veterans community, right? It's tricky, and there's pain. And I'm offering now to my potential donor a story that helps them know that by giving that there's a path for them to solve something, and that it should connect with them as powerfully as, as pulling out hot from a stoplight in that Porsche.
No, that makes
I
sense.
have a question on that, Margaret.
Yeah.
Most of my professional background is in nonprofits, so I've seen this in my own life, and we have also seen it quite a bit from, some of our clients who are in nonprofits or also in businesses. When their business or their organization has a variety of services that they offer, and they want to, kind of like, tell them everything all at once. Of like, we do this, and we do this, and we do this. How do you keep consistent messaging across, your variety of services? When it all feels equally important?
That's a great question, and it comes up a ton. And I mean, I think, like back in the day when we used to hand people folders, where like there was one central message, and then there were like, pull out sheets with the different things. Or I actually love that as kind of as a metaphor, like keep it high level and know in the back of your brain what all of those sheets are. And then we all of us are way better than we give ourselves credit for at actually reading space in a conversation. Right? So there's obviously, there are the words that are being spoken, and the asking of questions like, well, now that you know our mission, like, I've got a couple different programs, tell me what you're interested in, or what, so there's that. But there's also the way that if you are talking about something and somebody is not interested in it, like, this, right? Like we all know this when somebody is, drifting a little bit in a conversation. And as a fundraiser, nimble, agile, right? Like not derailed, but well, I picked something to talk about, and that was not the right thing for this donor. So how do you pause, regroup, name? Sometimes, okay, clearly that doesn't seem like your program. Let me tell you about something different, or even ask like, what's not interesting about that, right? So that there's engagement, and it's without having any embarrassment about like, we go in feeling like I have to be an expert, and it's crippling. It can be crippling. It doesn't give us space to dance with, with what's actually happening in the conversation. And, our donors are human, and we get to be all the human as well. Right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think you kind of have that, big level, and then not feel the freedom to talk about things and realize that you need to shift it.
Yeah.
To what they're, how they're reacting to the conversation.
Right. But also just to, like maybe, well, I may be generalizing, but like the thing that I really dislike is, sitting at a presentation where somebody just keeps going through slide. That's why there are no slides today. I'm a little anti-slides, and I may have overcorrected on that, but it's because it presumes interest in things that you just don't know, right? And it doesn't give a chance to weave and dance and be interactive. And on that note, I'd love to pause again and see like what questions do the rest of you have. And I'm going to ask I said your name probably incorrectly the first time. Can you help me with your name?
It's you can call me Fatu.
Fatu, wonderful. That I can work with. Fatu, tell me a little bit about you and your nonprofit, and what would be helpful for you if you have questions or things that you'd like to learn here.
Yeah, well, thank you, everybody. And thank you so much for putting up this webinar. My nonprofit is about women empowerment, especially in the rural communities in Africa, West Africa, is about access to food, water, and off-the-grid electricity and education. So like my colleague was saying, there are so many good things that you have to do. How do you address the most essential so people can get your program? For me, my struggle has been that as good as our programs are, and we've been very, very innovative in doing our work. We even created a social enterprise to join our nonprofit and made that social enterprise a way to raise funds to support the nonprofit. And the reason we created that social enterprise is because we don't have any donors. We don't have like funders to say, well, these are our consistent fund. I don't even know how to locate them. So I was part of a Posner Center for International Development, and I'm still part of the group. I mean, I did a presentation, you name it. I've spoken to the United Nations, a side event. I have spoken to different universities. I was, the recipient of an award-winning, not that I made that movie, but a movie that I found out before everybody else and did, and spoke about it everywhere, to the Dairy Center in Boulder. Even with all of that, we just don't have funders. And so I'm like, how do you even begin to locate people, audience who are interested in your program?
That's it's a great question, and certainly one that that new nonprofits face all the time. I will remind you that actually you may have funders, you just may not have asked them for money yet. I mean, you may actually have people who are interested in the work that you do and would be willing to give something or do something, but who you have not actually sent them something that requests money or had a conversation with them, right? I mean, if you had an audience full of people at the dairy, you do have potential funders in that group, right? And just having people see what you do is very, very different. People actually, they don't give until they are specifically asked to give. And having said that, I would encourage you to to sit with other people who you work with, who are I don't know if that's one other person or if it's just you, or if you have who your team is or what your resources are, but get incredibly creative about who have we been in front of, who might be interested, right? I mean, we know there are many people here who love international giving, and the reason that they love international giving is I might be spending $40,000 a year to put a kid through a private high school, or well, more than that probably, to send them to college here, but like in a different place internationally, like my dollars go so much further, right? I could educate 100 kids for that amount of money. So there's believing that there are people that love going outside of the borders of this company. There are plenty of people who will only fund locally, so there's all different kinds of donors who care about all different kinds of things. But it's beginning to sort of brainstorm, like who's out there who might be interested in what we do. Okay. Is there a geographic affiliation, or are there people who who give money to water projects in other parts of Africa who might be interested in expanding? How was beginning to think about who might believe in the work that you're doing. And you start with categories, because you may not have exact people yet. Is there any, yeah,
thank you, that's very helpful. So my other question would be, would it be possible to find a fundraiser, not you, but somebody like yourself who is knowledgeable, to say, could we find somebody to work with to just get us started?
Absolutely. I mean, you do have to pay people. So, but there are certainly, I think, fundraisers who might be willing to, to get paid a little. I don't know too many that are willing to work for free unless it's a board member.
Right.
but to hire somebody, yeah, I absolutely think there are people out there, and many organizations start there by hiring somebody 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week to help them, begin to build a list, begin to build a program. I'm not a huge fan of events for a lot of reasons in terms of their money-making capacity, but sometimes they're the perfect thing for a new organization to get the word out, So if you had a person and you had that event at the dairy, like, what would that person's job would be to help you follow up with those people.
Okay.
And
Right.
Fatu, I would love to connect with you because I'm on the board of an organization called Women First International Fund, but we
Oh,
don't do funding in West Africa. It's mostly 3 countries in Africa and India. But I would love to connect with you because there is the Global Fund for Women, and you could probably easily apply. I know folks at the Global Fund for Women, so I would love to connect with you. And
that would be fantastic.
yeah, and I've been to West Africa, Ivory Coast and all that, so I can help you.
You have been to Africa?
Oh yeah, I've been to Ivory Coast. I've been to quite a few countries.
That's awesome. So maybe we can exchange information on Zoom here. I can text you right now. That would be, see, this webinar is already fruitful. Thank you.
There you go. That's how you begin to build your list. Go places and talk about what you care about. And
Thank you.
let the universe,
Mhm.
love you back for the
Thank
work that
you.
you're doing. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for offering that.
You bet. Who else has a question, a need, a hope, a longing?
I have another question. I know you mentioned events, and that was going to be one of my main questions for today as well. I have not seen events, kind of like you mentioned, be helpful in really generating money, or the money that it does generate isn't a huge offset from the money that went into the event. Are there strategies that you can use to make it more profitable, or is it just not best avenue?
I love that. That is such a good question. I think, when we see big profitable events, they have a couple things that they have going for them. Usually they've been at it for a lot of years, and they have people, who look forward to that event. So there's sort of some tradition, and there's a list of people who come. They usually have tons and tons and tons of volunteers, people who are willing to go out and solicit auction items, and kind of those ways of increasing revenue, and you have to weigh that against high burnout. So do you have a team of people to help? And generally my experience is when the staff of a small nonprofit tries to put events together, they get grumpy. I see Morgan nodding along with me here. It's exhausting. It's like planning your wedding every single year sometimes. So I think one way to think about events is, I hear the question, how can we make more money from the event? But I'm not actually sure that that's the right question. I think the better question to start with is, what do we want out of this event? And sometimes the best thing that can happen from an event is people come and they hear your story, and you do a nice presentation, or you have some of your clients come and speak, and they work their way into the hearts of your donors. And then, you may not get a big amount of money there at that time, but now you have however many people attended or saw your presentation who have sort of notched up their investment, at least emotionally, in what you're doing. And then maybe there's work to do with them one-on-one to help get some more money. From a purely tactical perspective, if you're going to have an event and if there's going to be an auction, if you can find a matching donor, that I can't explain the science of that any more than I can tell you why the stock market is still doing great. But I can only tell you that people love giving to matches. So that, I think, turns out to be a pretty good tactic. Morgan, I'd love to ask you, it sounds like you've had a lot of experience here. What would you tell me?
We just wrapped up our match on the 30th, actually. And what I have found, granted, I'm new to this industry as well, but I think that it's really a win-win for both the donors who donate the funds for the match and the people who are donating to the match, because both of them, you sell it as they're doubling their money. And I have found in my time here that that's an effective way to raise a certain amount. We also do, so that was $1 million match. And then we also do $100,000 match during our gala with a paddle raise. And so it, provides an incentive for whoever's doing the paddle raise to say, we only have $50,000 more to go. Can you make an investment in our organization? Can you, can you double your impact by matching this amount? There's just, I think that there's a lot of different ways that you can sell it to people. And it, with a sense of urgency, I think that they're more inclined to donate that way.
Yeah, I think it does create urgency. And I just want to say, I mean, that's awesome. And I'm sure totally appropriate to your budget that you're getting $100,000 and $1 million matches. But I want to say for the smaller organizations, a $5,000 or $10,000 match is also motivating for people.
100%. I agree.
Yeah, totally. Are there other ideas that you have about, raising more money from events? What are because the match that we just did was so big, something that we did was a peer-to-peer fundraiser. So we had people set up their own fundraising pages and reach out to their networks. So we really leveraged the abilities of our supporters to bring in new money from new people that maybe we, there's no way for us to reach them without that connecting person. So, I would say that the peer-to-peer fundraiser was critical in raising that amount of money just because it expanded our network so much. Yeah, love that. But what I also hear is that there was something about raising money, but there was also a goal there, like to do some list building.
Yes. Yeah. So to really expand our reach and also to really leverage our volunteers, because in addition to the people that helped with the match, we have several, we have a large amount of volunteers that come in from corporations to help out here on site. We also have a women's guild, so like a group of women in the Denver metro area who share a commitment to a precious child. We have, a couple of different boards. So we do outsource a lot of what we do to our volunteers, and we really leverage their talents in a way that is effective for the organization. Yeah.
I love that. And I hear that. And honestly, having an event to build a list is a totally legitimate reason to have an event. It just also means like you can't necessarily get super attached to that also having a giant revenue.
Right. And it's again, it's a little bit easier for us because we are a larger nonprofit. And so we do have a development staff that can handle that. And so for a smaller nonprofit, it would most likely be much more difficult.
I think the other thing that's just super important right now is getting really creative, like what's going to make it fun, right? Like, and I think when people have fun, they're more likely to give for sure. And also to really shamelessly going back again to, to number 4, like shamelessly tell your story, make people feel, what's the equivalent of driving that Porsche? Like understand that if I were to write a check to this organization, I know what the problem is that they're serving. I know exactly what the model is, how my dollars are going to flow, and I know what the impact is going to be, of that. And, is it a video? Is it asking somebody to give a testimonial? But just, making sure like if you go to other, my other advice is like, go to a whole bunch of events, right? And check them out and, see what you like, what resonates with you. But a pretty common way to do that is to, have your testimonial or a video or something that really does speak to people's hearts. There are donors that are super metrics motivated, but it's not most of them. I think it's good to have some numbers and to have them available. Again, in case you are sitting across the table from somebody who needs them, you should know them in the back of your head. But I think most people are motivated more from a heart place. So they really do respond to stories, to the flow of dollars, things like that.
Yeah. Can I share a cautionary tale about that real quick?
Yeah, jump on in.
So mention that organization I was involved with, and I wasn't on the fundraising committee at the time, but there were some connections within the group with an owner of a large private beverage company, and he was a big booster of vets, and he was excited to help out. And so, a succession of meetings happened with the staff, and finally, somebody from our group, Betscape, was in front of him making a presentation and doing exactly some of what Margaret just mentioned, with a notable exception of not being able to articulate how that money was going to be used. So basically, there was a big portion of his giving budget that he was willing to dedicate to this group, but we could not, as a group, tell him what we were going to do with $1. He said, I think his question was something very direct, like, if I give you guys $1, what are you going to do with it? Where's it going to go? And it was kind of like, we're just going to help, we're going to do something. And it just wasn't what he was looking for. And it didn't give him the confidence, I think, to know that, hey, this would be a good investment in this group. So the story is very important, because that was compelling enough to get that meeting and get all the way through, to the decision maker. And where it fell apart was we just weren't able to finish the story and say, hey, and if you can help us on this journey, here's how we're going to use that. So not to be understated the importance of that. I think that's what torpedoed us in the end.
Yeah, love that. So yeah, you should be able to describe how the dollars flow. What the main service model is, who you're paying, what it is that they're going to do. And it's another great reminder. Your donors are creative, resourceful, and whole. They know things, and they know what they want to know.
No. Yep.
So, yeah. Do I have any other questions, concerns, points of learning? All right. If not, I'm gonna finish with one of my favorite stories that I thought of, Adrian, when you were speaking, which is this woman named Kim Klein, and she wrote several books, but about grassroots fundraising, and she shared a story about going on an ask to raise money for a capital campaign. And she was on the board of an environmental group, and they were doing, maybe it was $1 million campaign for some environmental thing. And they had in their heads, like, their main biggest donor was gonna give half the money. And so they sort of saved it up, and they went and they met with her, and I think they were asking her for $500,000, and they did their pitch, and they talked about it. And the woman nods, their donor nods, and she goes, well, thanks for presenting, but I'm actually not going to give you one thin dime. And after they stopped their gag reflex and caught their breath, they remembered to ask for feedback, which is another great thing to do as a fundraiser. And the woman said, you can't solve that problem for $1 million. That's a big problem. That is a big environmental problem. And I don't want to throw money away. If you can't come up with the solution, that's I know how much things cost, and there is no way in the world that $1 million is going to fix what you are talking about. So she's go home, come, tap into some vision, do something big, and then come back and talk to me. So that's my last little piece of inspiration. Don't be small, right? If you are trying to solve a problem, get out of apology and really think about what would it take to actually get some work done. But it's the same idea, Adrian. Many of our donors do come out of the business world. They're paying attention to how things work, but they also know what's possible and what's not possible for certain amounts of money. So yes, which brings me in closure to my last thing, which is stop over planning and do something. So there's number 5 for you.
Hey, Margaret, I'm sorry, since I joined in a little late, do you mind just saying the title of the 5 strategies, please?
Yes, I'd be happy to go through those. And so number 1 is that you do not get to decide what your donors are interested in.
Okay.
Or you do not get to decide ahead of time that they're not interested in you and the work that you're doing.
Okay.
Number 2, it's not a good time to be shy, especially during uncertain times. Share, get big, stay important, make sure you're really clear on why the work you're doing is still relevant, possibly more relevant. Number 3, do not buy into the collective myth that no one is making money right now. Because certainly there are plenty of people who are hurting financially, and there are many, many others who are not. Thanks, Morgan. Number 4, get consistent in your messaging and storytelling. And number 5 was stop over planning and do something.
Mhm. I like number 5.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I like number 5. Yeah.
Yeah. If you all want to connect with me anymore, you can find me on mkccoach.com. I'm happy to spend additional time. I do what I call a sample session. If you have specific questions or you'd like to set up some time with me, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to do that as follow-up. Yeah, here, I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Sure. Oops,
Thank
no,
you.
I
And I
just
have to
lost
go off
the-
too.
Okay,
Bye.
sounds good. All right, bye-bye.
Yep. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you. Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Margaret.
Yeah, thanks.